Everybody, welcome back to the channel. We are continuing our read-through of Brandon Sanderson's The Way of Kings, and we are up to chapter 26, entitled Stillness. And what's happened in this chapter is Dalinar is just coming off that conversation with his son, Adolin, and they have had an argument, right? Adolin's frustration sort of boiled over, and Dalinar and Adolin had certainly well, I guess it was a one-sided shouting match where Adolin told his dad, finally, once and for all, this is what I think about you, right? Well, we come back to this scene in the war camps, and Dalinar is listening to readings from The Way of Kings, that book by the ancient Alethi king Noadon, and he's sort of considering to himself just how far he's come. Back when his brother Gavilar used to be obsessed with this book, he had thought that he had lost his mind. He had lost his way. He had even at times abandoned the way of the Alethi. Well, here he finds himself in the same position. So he's sitting there listening, considering the conversation, when he hears the horn sound for a spotted chasm fiend. The men rush into action, but they have to wait for Dalinar, being the High Prince, to give them the yes or no. Now, it has been months since Dalinar has gone on a chasm run and a hunt for a chasm fiend and the gem heart located within it. And this is a moment of pause for him. He considers everything that Adolin has told him, how his men have looked to him, how his men continue to look to him, and he decides, we're going on this hunt. So he tells them yes, and everyone is hooping and hollering because this has been a long time coming. They have a lot of pent-up anxiety and energy. Everything gets into place. The soldiers line up, the archers, the cavalrymen. Of course, Dalinar does things differently than Sadeas does. Dalinar does not use bridgemen. He uses chulls to pull these mechanized bridges that lower down slowly. They're much, much slower, but they don't hurt human life. And so it's a much slower process, but that's what he's committed to. He's not going to burn through the lives of his men, right? Well, right as they're getting ready to ride out, who would show up but Sadeas himself? Of course, you'll remember at that party, Elhokar pronounced him the High Prince of Information in order to search out who actually cut this saddle strap, because Dalinar and Adolin's reports said no one did. It seems to have been an accident, and that's not good enough for him. And Sadeas was more than happy to weasel his way into that position, which gives him opportunity to now get into every other High Prince's war camp, which was not at all kosher beforehand. And sure enough, Bright Lord Sadeas shows up right as they're getting ready to ride out. Dalinar and he have a conversation that's short, that is not very friendly, and Dalinar lets him know, look, we're leaving, but of course, because you're in this position, you are able to interview any men, and if you're coming along, we're going. So Sadeas is going with them, and they do get into sort of an argument all along the way. Sadeas is just poking and poking and poking, and Dalinar realized, like, I can't explain to you why I'm passionate about this. And Sadeas actually is going to sort of snap at him towards the end of their conversation. Sadeas sniffed. That book ruined Gavilar, speaking of The Way of Kings. Now it's doing the same to you. You've listened to those stories so much that they've got your head full of false ideas. Nobody ever really lived the way the codes claimed. And Dalinar waves a hand and says, I don't have time for your snidiness today, Sadeas. And he rides off, having lost his temper and frustrated at the whole thing. Well, they get there. And sure enough, the Parshendi are coming across, and they're racing as well to get to that chasm fiend, because they're going to use the wealth perhaps even more so than the Alethi are going to use it. Well, they strap up, 10 heartbeats, the shard blades come to their hands, and also different than Sadeas, Dalinar and Adolin in shard plate with shard blade, they themselves lead the charge. Leaping over however long the chasm is, landing on the other side, and trying to wipe out as many Parshendi as is possible until those slower bridges can be lowered down and their soldiers can rush across. So again, you can see how much more care that the Kholins put into protecting their men than Sadeas does, and also how much slower the process is and how much they actually bring trouble and danger upon themselves. Where we want to draw our attention in this chapter, and this is where we'll kind of draw it to a close, is that we get this word, the thrill. It keeps popping up seemingly every time that Dalinar or the Alethi get into a bloodlust. They get into the throes of battle. We read, the thrill rose within him. The thrill consumed him. The thrill was almost pushing him forward aggressively. He needed victory. He needed to destroy the enemy. And Dalinar sort of allows this bloodlust to motivate him, and that's how he, throughout his life as the Blackthorn, this mighty warrior, has conquered so many enemies. They get into this mindset where they're just attacking everything in front of him, and they're almost unstoppable, especially with shard plate and shard blade. Well, we find that Dalinar, even in this moment, we read kind of in the throes of this, he was the Blackthorn. He was a natural force. He never was to be halted. He was death itself. And it cuts off there because we read, he felt a sudden stab of powerful revulsion, a sickness so strong that it made him gasp, and he slipped partially on the blood around him, but partially because his knees grew suddenly weak. He was horrified by everything around him. Something in him pushed back against the thrill that had risen up inside of him. And of course, in that moment, his fighting prowess also took a step back, and the Parshendi began to actually get some ground on him. Adolin throws himself in front of his father because he's perhaps even the greatest swordsman in the Alethi army in Alethkar, and he is incredibly defending his father and destroying and fighting and cutting. But Dalinar sort of finds himself realizing he's in the midst of a battle. This is not the time to have a crisis of faith. So he sort of lets the thrill rise up again in him as he returns to fighting. But he hears this voice that has been in the visions, this voice that has instructed him, has advised him at times. And we hear the voice once again, kind of in the midst of this battle again. The shard bearer was destruction incarnate, the most powerful force on the battlefield. And inside his head, this voice whispers, once these weapons were meant for protecting. Fighting continues on. And he hears the voice again as he's looking down at the dead Parshendi that he's slain. A Parshman nurse had practically raised Dalinar, yet here they were as if they were enemies. And here's his voice, life before death. This is internally, he asks himself, what was that voice? Life before death. And that's the last that the voice speaks. They win the battle. Adolin claims the gem heart, and Dalinar finds himself exhausted, really shocked at the experience that he is gone through here, right? What has happened? Wow. Who even is he, okay? So he's got a lot to figure out. This voice that keeps speaking to him. Who is this voice? And what does this voice want him to do? Once these weapons, the shard plates, were meant for protecting and life before death. What is this? And what does it mean for him? The last scene, as they're sort of gathering everything up to return back to the war camps, Dalinar looks out over the plains and he sees the retreating Parshendi. Of course, this is their strategy. They come and fight, and if they're not going to win, they retreat off into the depths, into the center of the shattered plains. But he sees something that is shocking. This army stood in ranks, grouped in war pairs, but a commanding figure stood at their head, a large Parshendi in glittering armor, shard plate. Even at a distance, it was easy to tell the difference between it and something more mundane. That shard bearer hadn't been here for the battle. Why arrive late? Dalinar thinks. Why come now? The armored figure and the rest of the Parshendi turned and left, leaping across the chasm behind them and fleeing back toward their unseen haven at the center of the plains. Dalinar is in a unique place. The Kholins are in a unique place. Sadeas now has this position of authority. What is his angle? And what is with this voice that keeps speaking to Dalinar? We'll continue to find out as we continue on, but this has been chapter 26. Thank you for watching. If you're interested, you can like and subscribe, and we'll continue to read through the Way of Kings in upcoming videos. Thank you so much. We'll catch you in the next one.